"Don't look between my legs," the giant widow warned, but when the lonely cowboy did, the sun was slowly setting behind the wide desert hills, turning the sky orange and gold. The wind moved gently across the open land, carrying dust and the smell of dry grass. In the distance, a lone cowboy named Daniel rode his tired horse toward a small town he had not visited in years. He had been traveling alone for a long time, moving from one place to another, never staying long enough to build real connections. Life on the road had made him quiet and thoughtful, but also very lonely. Daniel was not a bad man. He had once dreamed of owning land, building a home, and raising a family, but life had taken a different path. After losing his parents at a young age and facing one failed ranch after another, he had grown used to disappointment. The world had not been kind to him, yet he still held onto a small piece of hope deep inside his heart. As he approached the town, he noticed how quiet it was. The wooden buildings stood still, their paint faded by the sun. A few people walked slowly along the dusty street, but most kept their heads down. There was something unusual about the atmosphere. It felt heavy, almost as if the town was holding a secret. Daniel stopped his horse in front of the old saloon. He tied the reins to a post and stepped inside. The sound of boots against wooden floors echoed softly. A few men looked up at him, then quickly looked away. The bartender, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, wiped a glass slowly. "You're not from around here," the bartender said calmly. "I used to pass through years ago," Daniel replied. "Just looking for a place to rest." The bartender nodded but did not smile. "You can get a room upstairs, but don't wander too far at night." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Why that?" The bartender hesitated before answering. "Some things are better left alone." Daniel did not ask more questions. He had learned that small towns often carried strange stories. Still, the warning stayed in his mind. After eating a simple meal, he stepped outside to get some fresh air. The sky had turned dark blue, and the first stars were appearing. Across the street stood a large, old house that looked different from the rest. It was bigger, built from strong stone instead of wood. A single lantern burned near the entrance, casting long shadows across the yard. An elderly woman standing near the general store noticed Daniel staring at the house. "You're new," she said quietly. "Just arrived," Daniel answered. "Who lives there?" The woman's face grew serious. "The widow." Daniel waited for her to continue. "She came here years ago with her husband. He was a strong rancher. One day he went missing. No body, no signs, just gone." The woman lowered her voice. "After that, people changed toward her. They say strange things happen near that house." Daniel felt a small chill but tried to ignore it. "What kind of things?" "Animals disappear, lights flicker at night, and anyone who tries to get too close," she paused. "They leave town soon after." Daniel was not a man who believed easily in rumors. He had seen how fear could grow from simple misunderstandings. "Sounds like people talk too much." "Maybe," the woman replied. "But she once gave a warning to someone, told him not to look where he shouldn't. He didn't listen. He was never the same after." The words stayed in Daniel's mind long after the woman walked away. Later that evening, as he stood outside the saloon again, he noticed the front door of the stone house open slowly. A tall woman stepped out. She wore a long black dress that moved gently with the wind. Her hair was dark, tied back neatly. Even from a distance, Daniel could see that she carried herself with quiet strength. She looked across the street, and their eyes met for a brief moment. There was something in her gaze, not anger, not fear, but something deeper. It was as if she could see straight through him. Without fully thinking, Daniel crossed the street. As he approached, the lantern light revealed more details. Her face was pale but calm. There was sadness in her expression, yet also confidence. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I was just curious," Daniel replied. "People talk about you." "They always do." Her voice did not shake, "but curiosity can be dangerous." Daniel studied her carefully. She did not look like a monster from a ghost story. She looked like someone who had suffered. "I don't scare easily," he said. She stepped closer, her eyes serious now. "This isn't about fear, it's about respect." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the dry grass around them. "There are things in this world," she continued, "that people don't understand. When they try to force answers, they often regret it." Daniel felt both challenged and intrigued. He had spent years wandering, searching for meaning. Something about her presence stirred something inside him, a mix of mystery and connection. "What if someone just wants the truth?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. Truth comes in its own time. If you try to rush it, you might see something you are not ready to see. Her words were calm but carried weight. Go back to the saloon, she added. Rest, forget what you've heard. Daniel hesitated. And if I do? Her expression changed slightly, not to anger but to warning. Then whatever you discover will change you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The night air felt heavier now. Daniel finally nodded and stepped back. Good night. She watched him walk away, then quietly returned inside her house. Back in his small room upstairs, Daniel lay on the narrow bed staring at the ceiling. Her words echoed in his mind. He told himself he should ignore it. He had no reason to get involved in local stories. Yet something about her warning made him more curious. Outside, the wind grew stronger. A distant sound, perhaps an animal or just loose wood, broke the silence. Daniel closed his eyes, but sleep did not come easily. He kept thinking about the sadness in her eyes. About the town's fear, about the missing husband. He was not sure what tomorrow would bring, but deep inside he knew one thing clearly. He would not leave without learning more. And somewhere in the dark house across the street, the widow stood by her window, watching the saloon light flicker. As if she already knew he would not listen. The next morning, Daniel woke before sunrise. For a few moments, he forgot where he was. Then he heard the soft sound of wind moving outside the wooden walls of the saloon, and everything came back to him. The quiet town, the heavy atmosphere, and most of all, the widow. He sat up slowly and rubbed his face. He had not slept well. Her warning kept repeating in his mind. It was not what she said, but how she said it. There had been no anger in her voice, no threat, only certainty. Daniel stepped downstairs. The saloon was nearly empty. The bartender was already awake, cleaning tables. You look like you didn't sleep, the bartender said without looking up. Just thinking, Daniel replied. That house across the street will do that to you. Daniel did not answer right away. He poured himself some water and stood near the window. The stone house looked quiet in the morning light. It seemed almost peaceful, as if nothing strange had ever happened there. Why does everyone fear her? Daniel finally asked. The bartender paused, then sighed. It's not always fear, sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's misunderstanding. When her husband disappeared, people wanted someone to blame. She was different, quiet, kept to herself. That made her an easy target. So no one knows what really happened? No, the bartender's voice lowered. But strange things started after that. Livestock wandering off, tools missing. Shadows seen near the hills at night. People connect things when they don't understand them. Daniel nodded slowly. He had seen that before in other towns. When people could not explain something, they created stories. After finishing his drink, he stepped outside. The sun was rising now, warming the cold morning air. A few townspeople were opening their shops. Some glanced at him, whispering softly. Word had spread quickly that he had spoken to the widow. Daniel walked toward the edge of town, pretending he had no real direction, but his eyes kept moving back toward the stone house. He felt drawn to it again. As he reached the dirt road leading past her property, he noticed something unusual. The land behind her house looked greener than the rest of the dry fields around town. Small patches of healthy plants grew near the fence. That caught his attention. Most of the ranches in the area struggled because of limited water. Yet somehow her land seemed to thrive. He moved closer, careful not to cross onto her property. From where he stood, he could see a narrow path leading behind the house toward a small shed. Suddenly, the front door opened again. The widow stepped out holding a metal bucket. She stopped when she saw him. You didn't forget, she said calmly. Daniel removed his hat politely. I just like morning walks. Most travelers don't stay long enough to take morning walks. Her eyes were sharp but not unkind. Daniel hesitated before speaking. Your land looks healthy. She glanced toward the green patches. I work hard for it. In this dry place, that's not easy. Nothing worth keeping is easy, she replied. There was a quiet strength in her words that made Daniel respect her even more. He took a careful step closer, still staying outside her fence. People talk about strange things happening here. They do. And you don't defend yourself? She looked at him for a long moment. When people decide what they want to believe, defending yourself rarely changes their minds. Daniel could not argue with that. He had experienced similar situations in his own life. The wind moved through the grass between them. The morning felt still otherwise. I don't believe everything I hear, Daniel said. That can be a gift, she answered, or a burden. He studied her expression. There was tiredness in her eyes now, as if she had carried this weight alone for years. "Why warn me last night?" he asked quietly. She placed the bucket down slowly. "Because you don't look like the others." "And what do I look like?" "Like someone searching for something." Her words hit him harder than he expected. She was right. He had been searching not just for land or work, but for purpose. "You should be careful what you search for," she continued. "Sometimes answers come with responsibility." Daniel felt a strange tension in his chest. "Are you saying there is something to find?" She did not answer directly. Instead, she turned slightly toward the back of the house. "There are things buried in the past," she said, "not hidden to harm anyone, but hidden to protect." "Protect who?" "Everyone." The silence that followed felt heavy. Daniel knew he should stop pushing. But curiosity had already taken root inside him. The greener land, the missing husband, the quiet warnings, it all felt connected. "Let me help," he said suddenly. She looked surprised. "Help with what?" "Your land, your fences, whatever needs work. I'm not asking for payment." "Why?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Because I'm tired of running from place to place. Maybe helping someone else will help me understand my own path." The widow studied him carefully, as if measuring his honesty. Finally, she nodded once. "You can fix the broken fence near the shed." Daniel felt a small sense of victory, though he tried not to show it. As he worked through the morning, repairing wooden posts and tightening wire, he noticed something else. There was a small stream behind the shed, hidden by rocks and brush. It was not large, but it was enough to keep her land alive. The town must not have known about it. He realized then that her secret might simply be knowledge, something her husband had discovered before disappearing. While he worked, she stayed nearby, tending to plants. They spoke little, but the silence between them felt less tense now. By midday, sweat covered Daniel's shirt and his hands were sore. But he felt useful again, something he had not felt in a long time. At one point, he noticed a wooden hatch near the back wall of the shed. It was partially covered by dirt and grass. "What's that?" he asked casually. Her movements stopped instantly. "Nothing you need to worry about," she said firmly. Daniel felt the air shift again, just like the night before. He stepped back from the hatch. "I'm not trying to cause trouble." "I know," she replied more softly. "But some doors stay closed for a reason." He nodded slowly. In that moment, he understood something important. This was not about fear or magic or rumors. It was about trust. The town had lost trust in her, and she had lost trust in the town. As the sun began to lower, Daniel finished the fence repairs. He wiped his hands and looked toward her. "You work harder than most ranchers I've met," he said honestly. "Hard work keeps the mind steady," she answered. He glanced once more toward the hidden stream and the small hatch, but he did not ask again. Instead, he said, "I'll come back tomorrow if you'll allow it." She considered this, then gave a small nod. As Daniel walked back toward town, he noticed people watching him from a distance. Some shook their heads, others whispered. But for the first time since arriving, he did not feel uncertain. He had not discovered her secret. He had not forced any answers. Yet something had changed. He had stepped closer to the truth, not by looking where he shouldn't, but by choosing patience. And across the field, the widow watched him leave, wondering if this cowboy would truly be different from the rest. The hidden hatch remained closed. But not forgotten. Daniel woke the next morning feeling more awake than he had in years. The cold desert air filled his lungs, and he could hear birds starting to chirp in the distance. The quiet town was beginning to stir. Horses neighed, shop doors creaked open, and the smell of fresh bread floated from the small bakery near the center of town. But his thoughts were not on the town at all. They were on the widow and the strange, quiet strength she seemed to carry. As he tied his horse outside the saloon, he noticed that the wind had carried an unusual scent, dry grass mixed with the faint aroma of flowers he had never noticed in the desert before. He looked toward her house. The morning sunlight reflected off the stone walls, giving them a golden hue. He had seen many houses in his travels, but none gave the impression of life hidden within their walls like this one did. He decided to take the long way to her property, walking through the fields at the back of town. The dirt crunched softly beneath his boots, and he imagined how many people had walked this path before him. Some may have come with good intentions, others with curiosity that had led them nowhere. But Daniel felt a different kind of curiosity, one that was respectful, cautious, and somehow drawn to understanding, not just knowing. By the time he arrived at the widow's land, she was already working near the garden. The green patches he had noticed yesterday looked even more vibrant in the morning light. Rows of vegetables and flowers were arranged neatly, and the small stream behind the shed glimmered like silver as the sun hit the water. He watched her move gracefully, careful with each step, her hands steady despite the labor. "You're early today," she said without looking up. "I wanted to be helpful," Daniel replied. She finally glanced at him, her expression calm but assessing. "Helpfulness is different from curiosity. Make sure you know which you are showing." Daniel smiled faintly. "I think I understand the difference." "You might," she said softly, "but some lessons are only learned with experience." He spent the morning fixing the remaining sections of the fence, moving heavy posts and securing the wire. Sweat ran down his face, and the sun warmed his back, but he felt stronger than he had in months. Each movement, each piece of work, seemed to tie him closer to the land and to the widow. Not that he knew much about her, but there was something in the way she moved and spoke that suggested a lifetime of knowledge and experience. As they worked side by side, Daniel began to ask questions, small, careful questions about the land, the garden, and the stream. She answered each one patiently, though she always returned the conversation to the lesson, the value, or the care required to maintain something precious. "You've managed to keep this place alive," he said at one point, pausing to wipe his brow. "Even after everything that happened." "It takes more than hope," she replied. "It takes attention, patience, and respect for what you have. The world gives nothing without effort." Daniel considered her words. In his travels, he had seen many places fall into ruin simply because people gave up too soon or assumed it was impossible to maintain something without luck. He realized that she had not only maintained the land, but also kept herself steady despite the hardships she had faced. After lunch, she invited him to rest in the shade of a large tree near the house. The branches swayed gently in the wind, and the shade provided a welcome relief from the heat of the afternoon. "I'm curious," Daniel admitted after a moment. "About what really happened to your husband. Everyone talks about it, but no one knows the truth." She remained silent for a long time, as if weighing her words carefully. Finally, she said, "Some things are meant to remain private. Not because they are dangerous, but because they belong to memory. To reveal them too soon can cause pain or misunderstanding." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand. I feel like there's a story here I should know." "There is," she said quietly. "But it's not for you to see yet, not until you're ready." He looked at her, sensing that she was testing him, seeing whether he would respect her limits or try to push further. He chose patience. That decision surprised even him, but it felt right. For the rest of the afternoon, they worked quietly. Daniel repaired a small water wheel near the stream, ensuring the flow remained steady for the plants. The widow tended to her garden, occasionally instructing him on how to handle certain plants without damaging them. The work was simple but fulfilling, a rhythm that allowed them to communicate without words. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, Daniel sat on a rock near the edge of the property, looking at the widow. She was adjusting the water flow from the small stream, her movements precise and careful. He felt a strange sense of admiration. Here was someone who had endured loss, isolation, and the suspicion of others, yet she continued to care for her land with unwavering dedication. "You've changed my view of this town," Daniel said softly. "People change," she replied without looking at him. "Not because the town changes, but because they see what they choose to see." He considered that. For years, he had moved from place to place, judging too quickly and being judged too often. Here, he realized there was a different way to live, one that demanded attention, respect, and patience. As night fell, the widow invited him to stay for dinner. He hesitated at first, aware of town gossip and the unspoken warnings, but something about her tone made him feel safe. Inside her home, the air smelled faintly of herbs and cooked vegetables. The walls were lined with old photographs, some showing her husband, some showing the land when it was younger, greener, and more alive. They ate in silence for a while, breaking the quiet with small talk about the seasons, the crops, and the animals. Daniel felt at ease in a way he had not felt in years. The widow's presence was calming, yet her strength was undeniable. After dinner, she led him to the front porch. The sky was filled with stars, and the cool night air carried the distant sounds of crickets. "Tomorrow," she said, "we will finish the repairs near the shed. Then I will show you something, not the secret, but a lesson that belongs to you if you choose to take it." Daniel nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and respect. He had spent the day learning more about patience, care, and quiet strength than he had in his entire life. As he returned to the small room he rented in town, he realized that curiosity was no longer about uncovering secrets. It was about understanding, observing, and respecting the boundaries that people set. He felt different, not braver, not stronger, but more aware. That night he fell asleep quickly, dreaming not of the open road, but of the quiet stone house, the flowing stream, and the woman who had taught him the first real lesson of trust and patience in a long time. Somewhere across the field, the widow watched from her window, her eyes thoughtful. She knew the lesson had begun, and that the cowboy was beginning to see the difference between curiosity and understanding. The town slept quietly under the stars, unaware of the small change unfolding between the lone traveler and the widow. Tomorrow, Daniel would take another step closer, not into a secret, but into a story of resilience, care, and quiet strength that had waited for him all this time. The next morning, Daniel woke to a quiet stillness that felt different from the usual desert dawn. The air was cooler, fresher, and carried the faint scent of wet earth from the small stream behind the widow's house. He stretched and felt a strange anticipation. Today, he knew something important would happen. He arrived at the widow's land just as the sun began to rise. The golden light reflected off the stone walls, illuminating every detail. The carefully tended garden, the green patches of land, and the narrow stream glistening like a ribbon of silver. She was already outside, standing near the shed, her hands resting on her hips as she surveyed the work that remained. "Good morning," she said calmly. "Good morning," Daniel replied. "I'm ready to help," she nodded once. "Today you will learn more than work. Today you will understand." For the morning, they continued their work together. Daniel repaired some old wooden supports for the shed, while she guided him on proper techniques for tending to the land. Her instructions were patient but precise. Every movement she suggested had a purpose, and Daniel noticed how every action seemed to connect to something larger: the land, the stream, the life that surrounded her home. By midday, the shed repairs were complete. Daniel stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead. For the first time, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not just because of the physical labor, but because he had learned something important about patience, focus, and care. The widow motioned for him to follow her. She led him toward the back of the shed, stopping at the small stream that flowed through her property. The water was clear, and small fish moved gently beneath the surface. She crouched down and gestured for him to do the same. "This stream," she began, "is more than just water. It represents the care, patience, and thought that has kept this land alive. It is a lesson in observation. In life, many things appear ordinary, but with attention, you see the hidden effort, the hidden balance, the hidden lessons." Daniel listened carefully. He realized that her words were not just about the stream or the land, they were about life itself. He thought about the years he had spent wandering, missing details, rushing past lessons without noticing them. Here, in this quiet desert, he was beginning to see the difference. She stood and led him to the small wooden hatch he had noticed earlier. It was partially covered by dirt and grass, hidden from casual view. Daniel looked at it curiously, but she motioned for him to stop. "Do not open it," she said firmly. "Not yet. Today is about understanding what is visible, not rushing to uncover what is hidden. Some truths reveal themselves only when the time is right." Daniel nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and respect. He had wanted to see what was inside, but something in her tone told him that patience was part of the lesson. He realized that the real secret was not behind the hatch, but in the way she lived her life, quietly, carefully, and with purpose. They spent the rest of the afternoon tending to the garden. Daniel learned how to prune certain plants, how to adjust the water flow, and how to notice small changes in the soil that could indicate future problems. Each task required focus and attention, and each moment taught him patience and respect for the land. As the sun began to set, the widow called a pause. She led Daniel to a large, flat rock near the edge of the property. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the desert seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. "Look at the horizon," she said. "What do you see?" Daniel looked carefully. He saw the hills, the distant mountains, and the fading town behind him. At first, it appeared as nothing more than a simple desert landscape. But as he focused, he noticed the details, the subtle colors, the movement of animals in the distance, the way the wind bent the grass. He realized that he had never truly seen a view like this before. "I see life," he said slowly. "Exactly," she replied. "Life in every detail, but most people rush past it. They see only the surface and miss the lessons beneath. Understanding comes from attention, care, and respect. Today you have begun to see, not just look." Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude. The widow had not given him answers to mysteries, nor revealed secrets for him to exploit. She had taught him something far more valuable: how to observe, how to respect, and how to learn from what is visible. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, she invited him to sit with her by the small fire she had built. They shared a simple meal, speaking quietly about the land, the seasons, and the life they had cultivated. There was no gossip, no fear, only shared understanding and mutual respect. Finally, she spoke about the lessons of patience and trust. "Life is full of doors," she said. "Some are meant to remain closed until the time is right. Some are meant to remain closed forever." The mistake most people make is trying to force what is not ready to be revealed. You have learned to wait. You have learned to respect boundaries. That is the true lesson. Daniel realized she had been guiding him all along. The curiosity he had felt was not wrong, but it needed direction. He understood now that the hidden things, the stream, the hatch, the land itself, were symbols of patience, care, and respect. He did not need to see everything to understand the truth. He thanked her sincerely. "I have learned more in these days than in all my years of wandering," she nodded. "And that is why you are different from the others. You chose observation over impulse, respect over curiosity. That is the beginning of understanding." As Daniel returned to the town that night, he felt changed. The fear, the gossip, the unknown, none of it held power over him anymore. He realized that the widow's true gift was not a secret to uncover, but the lesson of life she had lived every day. The next morning, he prepared to continue his journey. He would not stay in one place forever, but he carried with him a new sense of awareness, patience, and respect for the world around him. He understood that some mysteries were not meant to be solved, only observed, and that the greatest lessons often came quietly, through effort and attention. Before leaving, he stopped one last time at the widow's property. She stood by the edge of the garden, watching him. "Thank you," he said. "You are welcome," she replied. "Remember what you have learned, observe, respect, care. Those who do this will always find the true path, even in the most difficult places." With that, Daniel mounted his horse and rode toward the open horizon. He felt the wind on his face, the warmth of the sun, and the steady rhythm of the horse beneath him. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel alone. He carried the lessons of patience, observation, and respect with him, knowing that wherever he went, he would see life in a way he never had before. And back in the quiet stone house, the widow watched him disappear over the hills. She returned to her work, tending her garden, maintaining her land, and quietly living her life. The hatch remained closed, the stream continued to flow, and the lessons she had shared remained with the man who had finally learned to see. Daniel did not need secrets to find meaning. He had discovered something far more important: the strength to understand, the patience to wait, and the wisdom to respect what should remain unseen until the right moment. From that day forward, he carried the widow's quiet lessons in every step of his journey, knowing that the true power of life lay not in what was hidden, but in how carefully one observed and respected the world around them.